All right, guys, welcome to our History Tuesday. I hope your weekend has been good. And for those who are watching this video later on, I hope that you find this topic very relevant to how you can create your future works. So we'll open up with the first question of today, which is, how does an artist make an artwork last forever? If you guys can type your ideas in the chat box. How does an artist make an artwork last forever? You can make it unique, memorable. That's a good idea. Make it so special that they'll never forget it. The piece that we're going to talk about today was definitely not forgotten. What about in materials? What kind of material could last forever? Rock? Yeah? I would say the oldest civilizations that we know of, what we uncover in their sites are always normally some sort of foundation of their city, often in rock, and also ceramics, believe it or not, so broken pottery. So rocks, metals, clays, those are the things that we unearth later on. Good thoughts all around. So speaking of memory, let me go to this next piece right here. Before I begin, if I could have each person here, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people, write a question on the board, and I'll give you your tools. Write a question about the work right here. We're writing it on the board so that the people who watch this later could also easily see it. A question about this artwork we're looking at today. Ooh, what does it mean? I like it. I'm going to let the questions go up first, and then I'm going to answer them, just in case someone asks something out of order. What cultural background? Who are the people? 3 questions here. What cultural background does this piece have? Who are the people? And, okay. Okay. So let's start here with this one. Who are the people? I'm going to let you know one thing. There's actually only one person represented here. Can you guys guess which figure is the human? The left or the right? The left, actually, is the human. I'm going to point to that guy. This is the human in the piece. And this is actually an exchange of power right here between a god and a human. And that will go to the next question here about what cultural background does this have. So where is this from, or what culture is this from? That's how I'm interpreting this question. And you are looking at ancient Babylonian, Sumerian, no, Babylonian. Is it though? Yes. So we're looking at ancient Middle East right here. What does it mean? Actually, the meaning is going to be inscribed all down below it. We're looking at something called the Stele of Hammurabbi. Now, I'm going to write this word right here, or the title right here, just to give you guys an indication of how it's spelled, because it's spelled not how you would think. The Stele of Hammurabbi. A lot of students get confused when they hear this at first, because what do you think people think it's made out of when they hear Stele of Hammurabbi. Yeah, they think of the metal, or maybe how if it was taken, or there's something else going on. Though stele, when it's spelled this way, S-T-E-L-E, normally describes an artwork that often has a flat seam or a frieze like this, and there's writing involved. And we actually are only seeing the top of the artwork in this piece. I'll show you guys the rest of it in a second. So, let's see. The Stele of Hammurabbi. Who are those people, and were they real or alive at a certain time? Yes, so this guy was definitely real and alive at this time. And everyone definitely believed that the god here was alive as well. And then what does it mean? So this was, the Stele of Hammurabbi is in fact the first written laws that we have record of, right? It's the first written laws. Has anyone ever heard of Hammurabbi's Code? Give me a thumbs up if you've heard of Hammurabbi's Code before. Nope. Mostly new to everyone else? Well, when you take your World History 1, so I guess your Intro to History course, yes, right, Madison, it is an eye for an eye. When you take that history course, you'll hear about this piece as well. But this is how it actually looks. We just saw the top right here. And to give you guys a frame of reference, I believe how the ancient code was written, I think it was up to down. And there are segments all around here. And this is written all the way around. This is a three-dimensional kind of a circular piece. And notice how good the carving is up here, but they kind of had to work with the natural shape of the stone otherwise. Okay. So I got some tea for you guys about this piece, but today I'm going to drink some coffee instead. So once again, if you have something warm to hold, you can warm up to this lesson. We are looking here at the Stele of Hammurabbi, which it took a long time to be translated because we had to find certain artifacts that had multiple languages written on it before this was ever translated. But Madison hit onto it pretty well. These are the first codes written down. So obviously law and code existed before this, but what's the problem when you don't write it down? Can you guys tell me in the chat box? What's the issue with not writing down your laws? You forget it, right? So it's true. Old parts of the empire could just be like, oh, I don't know what law you're talking about. We can't remember it. What else can happen if you don't write it down? You could change it by mistake or on purpose. Right, definitely. So forgetting it or changing it, and who's there to really verify and check in? So Hammurabbi was the first god king here to ever have his code written down. And then this whole piece right here, this whole giant, heavy rock, this is really heavy, was toted around from town to town for people to read it. But the thing is, could everyone read back then? No, right. So in the end, still only select people could read it. So that's about where the script ends. So these would be people who were called, we would today, or they eventually would be called clerks or clerics, or they would take notes. And these are people often in charge of shipping and billing. So kind of like the early clerk was, came along with the development of business. So this is a person who was pretty good at math and could learn the basics of writing to communicate in order between towns. And they would track things. So as soon as we really started trading as people, we started documenting that trade. So very few people will learn how to do that. And oftentimes, especially if they were very linguistically capable, they were supported by whatever religion. So the clerks often have always worked for a religious institution. Yeah, so still only a few people could read this, but they would be select people of the town, and they would be in charge of memorizing it. But there are a lot of laws in here. I'm talking about several hundred passed around, and they're very, very, very specific. So Madison goes in here to tell us about it's an eye for an eye kind of law that we're looking at. So what does that mean, eye for an eye? I believe even Shakespeare referenced this. I think sometimes it's a very positive way. I wish they were that enlightened to see things on the same page. It was more about the early idea of being fair. So an eye for an eye. If I got in a fight and someone stabbed out my eye, the law could step in place and take their eye. Yes, it is a brutal time period, for sure. Now, this is the same way as, like, say you and your sibling had two books, and y'all were fighting over one book, and that book tore, and you asked your mom and dad, like, punish them, like they tore my book, and so the parents would come over and tear their book in half as well. Yes, you do not want to be at the time, especially as a woman. You do not want to be at that time. And it's from these laws that we understand a lot of the early cultures. This is a big thing for us because this is the expectation of how people are supposed to behave. The brutal golden rule, very true. Since this time, we have been much more enlightened in how to civically handle things. So let's talk about a little bit about the difference of being a man and a woman in this time. So, and it's actually inscribed on the stone itself. If a husband, we'll start with the wife. If the wife should cheat on the husband and take another partner, what is her consequence legally? What is the law allowed to do to a woman who would cheat on her husband? Death. Right. Divorce was a rarity back then. And actually, in fact, in this culture, you could have many wives, but women couldn't have many husbands in this culture. Yes. But if a husband should cheat on his wife out of wedlock, what happens to him? The husband should cheat on his wife. What is the consequence? No, Madison, it's not that fair. In fact, he only has to pay a fine. If the woman brings him to court, he has to just pay a debt or a fine to the court. Very true, Madison. That is not fair. Women at this time were not treated well. This is not, if you wanted to transport back in time, this is not where you want to go. at least looking like a woman. It was a rough time to be sure. Yeah, it was pretty cold. So this piece is still held today. Now we know that this is something that we would call hierarchical scale, and I'll get into that in a little bit. And that means who actually has the most power, the human or the god? And you don't even have to know, the god, right? How do we know that the god has the most power in this image? I believe this is the god named Shamash. He was like the god of thunder and lightning. His name sounds like an onomatopoeia, like of lightning in the distance. That's why I can always remember it. How do we know he's the God? He looks fancy and he's sitting. Now imagine that if he was standing, would he be taller or shorter than the man? Taller, for sure. If he is already in line with the human, just by sitting down, we know that should he stand up, he will be taller. This is ancient text, guys, a really simple rule. The person who is tallest in the image always has the most power. And that includes if they folded the person. You also know that he's a god because of what he's sitting on right here. It's hard to tell from far away. I can even take us back so we can see it up close. This right here, this is actually a throne of clouds. And these are supposed to represent the clouds underneath. The throne too. The throne definitely has the most power. He even has this sort of cap of clouds as well. And notice right here, this is like an early metal helmet for war in the traditional robes of the ancient men of power. But yeah, so he's sitting on a throne of clouds. And if we can imagine that if he would stand, he is taller than Hammurabbi, which is a big deal. Hammurabbi was not a subtle person at all. He wanted to show that he had the most power. And lastly, what is this god doing to Hammurabbi? What is this? The god isn't begging, I would say, or Hammurabbi isn't really begging either. Yes, so Hammurabbi is doing a sort of salute prayer, like this. Right, the god is giving Hammurabbi power. This is like how if you hear in a wedding, by the power invested in me, by the court of something or another. This is essentially the same thing. Hammurabbi is claiming that he has divine power, so listen to him. Because the god gave him power, everything he writes down, you should listen to. And that's all that this is saying up here. It's a pretty big deal. But this was his proof for people who couldn't read, that they should listen. Okay. So my question to you guys, if y'all could write on our stone tablet here, using your tools, what do you think is a fair law that can keep people in line? So what's something that should stand the test of time? You could think about basic human nature here. If everyone follows this law that you write down, we'll be okay, at least in some parts of our society. Obey laws. If not, prison. That's efficient. I like it. If you guys want to, you can also change the text to be white. Equal rights. Yes, so clear. Simple, to the point. I often find that the laws that are the strongest tends to be the clearest. Like, drive on the right side of the road. Every time you'll be fine. If we have weird other conditions, driving gets messy. Any other law that we could write down? The question of fair is always difficult in writing a law, because what's fair to some people might not be fair to everyone, right? Which is why we have to keep the equal rights measure in mind that Grieflin pointed out to us. Which is why so many laws have different caveats as well. They have all the different clauses in there that tell you, but this might not apply if this happens, or this should apply in this situation. Any other universal laws? I'll put hers right here. Nice. Treat everyone the same and how you want to be treated. Right. So this is something that also would probably change by culture too, Sinai. So, you know, what someone in New Jersey, how they might treat a friend might be different than how someone in, say, Louisiana would treat a friend. So that's a great blanket law. But that also might be one that had to have several little caveats for if someone's from out of the country or from out of state. Okay, I will move on in 3, 2, 1. Let's talk a little bit about hierarchical scale. I love this word. This is a good word. That's another SAT word. Should you find a way to use hierarchy or hierarchical in a writing assignment, once again, your teacher would be like, what? This is such a big deal. But what does it mean, hierarchy? You guys can tell me in the chat box. All right, yeah, so it's about the ranking of who is important, essentially. We definitely have hierarchy in our society, right? High status, exactly. We have hierarchy in our society, and we always have. But my question is, should we? And this goes back to an ethics deal. So as artists, you will always be hired or choose to portray people of power. But my question is, how should we do that? And this comes down to our own country here. So when I was in high school, George W. Bush, this guy, Jr., he was our president. And you could see him, normally presidents you see in 2 different kinds of scenes here. Now in our Constitution, it says that we are not just a democracy, but a representative democracy. What does it mean to be a democracy, and what does it mean to be a representative democracy? Does anyone know what it means if you are a true democracy? Or give me a check if you know what the word democracy means. A true democracy. Okay. So the word democracy or democratic comes from the Greek or the Greeks, who had something at one point at least called a true democracy. So this is old. You'll actually hear this again come up in world history time and again. And even in government later on, you still have to be able to differentiate this out. Yeah. So the ancient Greeks had the true democracy, which was everyone had an equal voice in government. That means you, your neighbor, the wealthy man, the business, everyone had a voice in government. A representative democracy means that we vote for someone else to speak for us. That's what we have here, current day U.S. Because based on the main idea that there are too many people, representatives, that there are too many people in this country, therefore we must choose someone to speak for us, right? Which is why the elections are such a big deal, as you're choosing someone who's going to be your voice, right? So as artists, we have to choose which side we're going to document. Are we going to choose to portray leaders as a pure democracy, as equals? So this is a president from my era, and then his different chiefs of staff right here. This is essentially all the different departments. You see the military and security, treasury, you see they're all in the same line. Or are we going to choose to have, I'll change the color here, to portray the president in a representative democracy? Notice that in all the images, we make them seem larger. Even if they're not technically larger than anyone in real life, every angle that you'll capture should be larger. So this is just your own opinion here, but I'll say use one of the marker tools or the writing tools and give a check next to which representation do you think is best for our current country. Should we show people in power as being in line, or should we always show them bigger than the common man? And there's no judgment here, I'm just curious. We have one vote. Do you think the left is a better strategy or the right? Now, originally, there's something interesting with the word president. I have a TED Talk I can find and share with you guys at some point. The word president was actually originally a way to keep a president from being power mad. The actual word president, when the country was founded, meant a person who presides over a meeting. That's it, like a team leader, but not a king. It was like a committee leader. And the entire government was at odds with it. Basically, the House of Representatives wanted to keep the president's power checked, whereas the Senate thought that he wouldn't be respected across the world if he didn't choose a name like king or a monarch or something. And they never decided on it. So still it's in our law today that the Senate can choose to change the name at any time. They never decided on what to call them, so they said, we'll just leave president for now. And now there are over, I think, like 120 presidents around the world, the different countries. So the power in this country affected how other countries shape their own representative democracy. So the word changed over time to mean someone who is powerful. Okay, we have one more second to vote. Which do you think is a better way to represent the president in current day, the left or the right? Moving on. And 3, 2, 1. Okay. So we're talking about the Stele of Hammurabbi here, and I'll go back to this image so that you guys can see it one more time. The Stele of Hammurabbi. How would we describe the style or process? So on the left side, describe kind of what it looks like. Is it more refined than what we've seen? Is it smooth? Is it soft? Does it look very hard? How would you describe this style if you were to describe this work to someone who's never seen it before? On the right side, describe the process here. Like, how do you think this was made? You're probably right. Rock art really only has a few strategies at this point in history. Oh yes, it's very tall. It's probably at least as tall, if not taller, than the average height person at that time. Something interesting to note is that men's height evolutionarily has evolved a lot over time. I think in prehistoric man, the taller man was considered, the average height skeleton of a man was about 5'3", 5'4", and now the international average height of a man is 5'10", 5'11". Whereas in the olden days, the average height of a woman was actually 5'2" across the world. And today, the international average is 5'3". So over thousands of years, women have gotten an inch taller on average. And that includes the shortest person and the tallest person. So averages can throw us off sometimes. It's tall and more solid, right? They did not want this piece to fall apart on the road. There's some really interesting statues from this era in art history as well. There's actually a number of cursed statues, believe it or not. Let's see. So I have one person that's given us some info on style. Thank you, Sinai. Let's have Graceland or Aaron or Madison give us some ideas on the process. How do you think this was made? By chipping at a rock. Yeah, you got it. You essentially take other rocks to funnel things down. We're still in the rock and stone era just because things have lasted. We do think that people definitely had paintings back then still. They definitely had ceramics. They were working with clay. We even know of instruments and things like that. But rock is truly the thing that lasts, that persists. Moving through this lesson pretty quickly. Okay, so we're going to have another compare and contrast from last week to this week. So tell me, how are they similar and how are they different? There's a lot of obvious differences. And there's a few definite similarities. Maybe I'll play some music for you guys while you do this. Get some ambiance. This is a cool song. It's made mostly with zills and bells, actually, this song. Nice, you see we have a lot in common. Okay, so cool. So the left side, Graceland said it's made from chalk and rocks. Also remember that it's made from other paints as well, especially toxic berries. The right side here, Sinai has told us that this is definitely more solid than the horses of Lascaux. That's right. If someone came in and breathed on this piece, they wouldn't get sick or it wouldn't fall apart. More flat than Stele Hammurabbi. Very true. Yeah, so the left side is the complete 2D work. It's just a painting, whereas the right side is what we would call a relief, which is a 3D work in which it's kind of like a 3D movie. It comes out at you, but it's flat at the back. They also do have one thing that we've missed in common here. From both of these, we've figured out what about the culture. You can tell me in the chat box. From looking at these pieces, we learned these things about the culture. And actually looking at all the pieces that we've looked at thus far, we figured out kind of one thing that spreads across every single one. It is tricky. So, from both of these, we figured out about what's important to the society. So, for example, this Horses of Lascaux was a form of what? By painting fat horses and fat animals on the wall. What were people doing? It was an act of what? Worship, right. It is an act of worship. In the same way, we are truly seeing that church and state were one at this time. There was no separation here. So they both are similar in the fact that we know about the religion. We are beginning to learn more and more about not only how people lived, but what they believed in, which is a huge indicator on their actions. So knowing someone's beliefs and philosophies, we can guess how or predict how they're going to behave and predict how they will respond to something. And we can also guess how they viewed the world. So that's something that all the pieces we looked at have had in common, is we have this early form of religion. All right. Now, how does the Stele of Hammurabbi affect the art world? All of a sudden, artists are now employed to do what? Since the Stele, oh sorry, I didn't change the label on that. Ah, that's my bad. Let me change the color here and make it all the way up here. Such a pretty color job. And then I'll write Stele of Hammurabbi. Actually, that might be 1B. I think so. That feels right. So what's something that the creation of this, how did it change the art world? All of a sudden, artists are now being paid to make what? And we're still being paid to do it today. You can type it right here in the box. If it's something that they were paid to do back then and paid to do now, you're right. I'll play another song while you're thinking on it. Yes, Madison, I think you've really hit the nose there. All the other ones are correct too. But from this, artists are now and forevermore being paid to make someone look more powerful than they might actually be, right? For example, the artist who painted or carved the Stele of Hammurabbi, he didn't actually see Shamash, right? Or from what we know of, maybe he did. But he was told to make sure that Shamash is at the same head level as Hammurabbi, but also still don't say that he's too small because then you might incur his wrath. So the artist had to cleverly develop a way to make Hammurabbi look as strong as the god and have the power that the god had handed over. So still today, we as artists are always paid to make someone look more powerful than they are. You know, we can think about it in a political sense. Like, look at the images that come across your computer. Who is supposed to look more powerful in that image? Because that is purposeful. It's not an accident. And when you see someone that seems powerful compared to the rest of you, how do you feel? Do you feel as powerful as that person if they look so much larger than the average person? No, right, Graceland. You're supposed to feel tiny, and an artist has helped to convey that. So now that you know this, you can choose to be intelligent with how you use the information. You can use this in your own art. And it's not to say that hierarchical scale is bad or anything. It just exists. It's not in itself a moral thing. But you can use this information to make something or someone look more powerful, and it's within your control now as an artist. Which brings us to the next slide. So how does learning this lesson impact you? Maybe you're thinking about the materials, working with rock. Maybe you're thinking about the context of art history and learning more about law. Or maybe this is something that you're thinking about in terms of hierarchical scale again. How can you use that using size to show power? So this is the second to last slide. Just give me your own thoughts. How does this new information impact you or your work? And then we have 4 people here, so I'd like to see 4 responses before we leave. I'll put on some more music. Right. I think it's also important to know that some, they're not being necessarily to have bad intentions, but to know that you're supposed to get an emotional reaction from the artwork, for sure. Not everything is as it seems, very true. And as artists, we can actually control that. We can show people what we want them to see. Oh, I guess we have 3 people left, so 3 comments seems fine. Oh, 4, yay! Yes, religion meant a lot to the people. So remember, at this point in time, the concept of agnostic and atheist wasn't really common. Religion and how people saw the world was so ingrained to every daily life that we don't really have early accounts of people who dissent against the concept of religion. Now, obviously, the emerging religions were already starting to argue with one another over who had the correct version. But the idea of being without didn't truly exist on a large scale. and also the idea that it could be different, like that church and state could be separate, didn't really exist either. So to live in this time meant to automatically grow up in a religion in which your government was a part of the church. Okay. This is an abstract thing. If you guys can give me an idea before you leave, I'll also hang out a little bit to answer any questions if you guys have anything. But how could you incorporate law and ethics into your own work? In this way, this might be an approach of a political artist here, of which there have been, thousands upon thousands of political artists out there. How can you incorporate any laws or ethics into your art? And there's no wrong answer here. Oh, good. I'm glad it helps, Sinai. Yeah, I've seen some people have already skipped ahead to next week's content too, because I guess they are able to work ahead, which just makes me happy. But yeah, I hope that everyone has a calmer week this week, especially in this class. And if you're behind on anything, you can use this time to catch up. And also remember that there is going to be almost a full week in October in which I think all of your classes will have little to no content because it's essentially a week off. So you guys can schedule ahead for that too, right? A lot of people I know are considering that makeup week, the time to get everything in. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that too. It'll be nice to have a chance to make everything up. All right, so if you don't have any questions or don't have any ideas on this big open question, you're welcome to leave. I'm going to turn off the recording in a second.